Lena Park, a fierce and overworked social worker, reaches her breaking point when she witnesses a luxury motorcade nearly strike an elderly street vendor in the rain-slicked streets of Seoul. In a fit of righteous fury, she marches up to the lead car and delivers a resounding slap to the man stepping out, Jae-Hwan Kim, the undisputed dragon of the Korean underworld. While the city freezes in terror, expecting her immediate execution, Jae-Hwan is inexplicably captivated by her lack of fear, a trait he hasn't seen in years. Instead of retaliating, he begins to shadow her life, weaving himself into her world under the guise of making amends. As Lena is pulled into his orbit, she discovers the heavy burden he carries and the enemies circling his throne. When an internal coup leaves Jae-Hwan wounded and isolated, Lena must use her wits and her knowledge of the city's forgotten corners to hide him. Through a journey of blood and neon, she transforms from his harshest critic into his most trusted ally, teaching the man who rules through fear how to lead with a heart. The sound of the slap was still echoing in the air when the world seemed to stop. The rain continued to fall, but the crowd of pedestrians stood like statues, their breath catching in their throats. Lena's hand was stinging, a sharp heat radiating through her palm, but it was nothing compared to the ice-cold dread that suddenly filled her stomach. Standing before her was Jae-Hwan Kim. He didn't roar. He didn't strike back. He simply stood there, his head still tilted from the force of her blow. Behind him, the air turned lethal. Two bodyguards moved with the speed of striking cobras. One reached for the inside of his jacket, his face twisted in a snarl of rage, while the other stepped forward to grab Lena's throat. Lena closed her eyes, waiting for the end. She had slapped the dragon, and she knew the price of such a mistake was usually life itself. Stop. The word was quiet, but it had the weight of a mountain. The bodyguards froze instantly, their boots skidding on the wet asphalt. Jae-Hwan slowly turned his head back to face Lena. A thin trail of red appeared at the corner of his mouth, and a dark bruise was already beginning to bloom on his sharp jawline. He raised a hand, not to hit her, but to signal his men to stand down. His eyes, dark and piercing like a hawk's, searched Lena's face. He didn't see the greed or the hidden agendas he was used to. He saw raw, honest fury. "You have a lot of spirit for someone so small," Jae-Hwan murmured. His voice was smooth, like silk over a blade. He stepped closer, stepping into Lena's personal space until she could smell the scent of expensive cologne and rain. Lena refused to back away. She gripped her damp briefcase tighter, her chin trembling but held high. "Your cars almost killed that woman," she snapped, her voice shaking. "Does your money make you forget that other people exist?" A faint, terrifying smile played on Jae-Hwan's lips. It wasn't a smile of kindness, it was the look of a collector who had just found a diamond in a pile of coal. He reached out, his silver cufflink glinting in the neon light, and used one finger to lift her chin so she had to look him in the eye. "Tell me your name," he commanded. It wasn't a request. "Lena." "Lena Park," she whispered. "Lena Park," he repeated, as if tasting the words. He turned to his lead guard, his expression becoming unreadable. "Remember this face. From this moment on, no one touches her. No one speaks to her. She belongs to the dragon's curiosity now." He stepped back into his car without another word. As the door closed with a heavy thud, the motorcade began to move, leaving Lena standing alone in the rain. She had survived the slap, but as the red taillights faded into the fog, she realized her life would never be the same. Lena tried to ignore the rose. She tried to ignore the black cars and the mysterious help. She threw herself into her work, spending 14 hours a day at the community center, hoping that if she stayed busy enough, the dragon would get bored and find a new toy. But Jae-Hwan Kim was not a man who got bored. On Friday night, Lena stopped at her favorite hole-in-the-wall noodle shop. It was a tiny place, smelling of spicy broth and steam, usually packed with loud students and tired laborers. But when she pushed through the plastic door curtain, the shop was eerily quiet. There were no students. No laborers. Just one man sitting at the counter, slurping noodles from a plastic bowl as if he didn't have a care in the world. Jae-Hwan looked up, his dark eyes catching the flicker of the shop's fluorescent light. He looked different without the wall of bodyguards. He had traded his suit jacket for a simple black sweater, but the power he radiated still made the small room feel cramped. "The broth is a bit salty tonight," he said casually, gesturing to the empty stool beside him. "Sit. Eat." Lena felt her heart hammering against her ribs. She didn't sit. "You cleared out the restaurant," she accused, her voice echoing in the silence. "These people need their dinner. The owner needs the money. You can't just move people around like chess pieces." Jae-Hwan set his chopsticks down with a precise click. "I paid the owner 3 months' worth of profit to have 30 minutes of your time, Lena. He is currently in the back, very happy, counting his money. Is that not the justice you're always fighting for? Making sure the little people get paid?" "Not like this," Lena snapped, finally stepping forward. "You're mocking me. You're following me. Why? Was the slap not enough? Do you need to see me crawl?" Jae-Hwan stood up. He was much taller than her, and the shadow he cast swallowed the small table. He walked toward her until he was just inches away. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small, crumpled piece of paper, the flyer for her social agency's upcoming food drive. "Most people see me and think of what they can take. Power, money, protection," he said, his voice dropping to a low, dangerous hum. "But you saw me and only thought of how much you hated me for being in the way." It was refreshing. He leaned in, his gaze dropping to her lips before meeting her eyes again. "I'm not here to make you crawl, Lena. I'm here to see if that fire in you is real, or if it was just the rain making you brave." He placed a heavy envelope on the counter. "Your food drive. It's fully funded. Consider it a down payment on our next conversation." Before she could throw the money back at him, he was gone, disappearing into the night as silently as a ghost, leaving Lena alone with the smell of spicy noodles and the terrifying realization that he wasn't just watching her, he was learning her. The following Monday, the true weight of Jae-Hwan's interest crashed down on Lena. When she arrived at the social center, she didn't find her usual stack of overdue bills. Instead, she found her boss, Mr. Choi, trembling with excitement as he held a thick, leather-bound contract. "Lena. You've saved us," he cried, waving the papers. "The Kim Group has chosen our small agency to lead their new urban renewal initiative. They've granted us a budget larger than our last 10 years combined." Lena's stomach turned to lead. She grabbed the contract, her eyes scanning the fine print. There, at the bottom, was a clause written in bold, unmistakable ink: "Project oversight must be handled exclusively by lead social worker Lena Park. No substitutions allowed." "It's a trap," Lena whispered, but Mr. Choi was already talking about the new computers and the renovated kitchen for the homeless shelter. She had no choice. Within an hour, a sleek car arrived to whisk her away, not to the slums she usually served, but to the soaring glass and steel heights of the Kim Group headquarters. The building was a monument to power, cold and intimidating. She was escorted to the top floor, where the city of Seoul spread out like a map beneath her feet. Jae-Hwan was standing by a floor-to-ceiling window, looking out at the world he owned. He wore a sharp, charcoal suit that made him look like a king in his castle. "Welcome to your new office, Mississippi Park," he said without turning around. "I won't do it," Lena said, her voice echoing in the vast room. "You're using my agency to wash your reputation. This isn't charity, it's a cage made of gold." Jae-Hwan turned, his expression calm and unreadable. "Call it what you like. But in that cage, you have the power to feed every hungry child in this district. You can fix the broken elevators in the public housing units you complain about. Or," he stepped closer, his shadow falling over her, "you can walk out. You can keep your morals, and I will pull the funding. The kitchen stays empty. The elevators stay broken. The choice is yours." Lena looked at the man who was holding her entire community hostage with a smile. He was giving her everything she had ever wanted for the people she served, but the price was her own freedom. She would have to see his face every day. She would have to answer to him. "You're a monster," she breathed. "I am a businessman, Lena. And I've just made you the most powerful social worker in Korea," he replied, handing her a gold-plated security badge. Now, sit down. We have work to do. As she took the badge, their fingers brushed. The spark of defiance was still there, but as she looked into his piercing eyes, she realized the dragon hadn't just caught her, he had made her a part of his world. Working at the Kim Group was like being trapped in a storm. For 2 weeks, Lena spent her nights buried in paperwork, surrounded by glass and cold steel. Jae-Hwan was always there, a silent presence in the corner of the office. He didn't bark orders, he simply watched, his sharp eyes following the way she bit her lip when she was frustrated or how she kicked off her shoes under the desk when she thought he wasn't looking. One rainy Tuesday, the clock struck midnight. Lena groaned, rubbing her temples as she looked at a map of the city's most dangerous district. The city won't give us permits for the medical van, she sighed. They say it's a security risk because of the gangs. They don't say that because of the gangs, Jae-Hwan's voice came from the shadows. He was sitting on a leather sofa, his tie loosened and his top button undone. He looked tired, genuinely tired. They say that because they're being paid by the private clinics who don't want the competition. Lena looked at him, surprised. How do you know that? Because I'm the one who usually pays them, he said simply. Lena expected to feel angry, but instead, she felt a strange flicker of pity. She walked over and sat on the edge of the desk near him. Why do you do it, Jae-Hwan? You have more money than you could spend in 10 lifetimes. Why keep playing these dirty games? Jae-Hwan leaned his head back against the sofa and closed his eyes. When I was 10, my father was a vendor, much like the woman you defended in the street. A local gang took everything we had because he couldn't pay protection money. He died with nothing. He opened his eyes, and for a second, the cold dragon was gone. In this city, you are either the one holding the leash or the one wearing it. I decided I would never wear it again. He stood up and walked toward her. He didn't look like a boss now, he looked like a man who was carrying a weight far heavier than his tailored suit. He reached out and touched a stray lock of her hair. You think you're the only one who cares about those streets, Lena. But I remember every corner of them. I just chose a different way to survive them. For the first time, Lena didn't pull away. The silence between them wasn't tense, it was soft. She realized that beneath the expensive cufflinks and a lethal reputation, there was a boy who had been hurt, and he had built a mountain of power just to hide his scars. You can still choose to be the man who protects them, not the man who owns them, she whispered. Jae-Hwan didn't answer. He just looked at her with a gaze so intense it felt like he was memorizing her soul. The moment was broken by the sudden, frantic buzzing of his phone. As he answered, his face instantly hardened back into stone. I see, he said into the phone, his voice cold. Prepare the cars. It's starting. The following week, the atmosphere in the office shifted from quiet tension to an invisible electricity. Lena's urban renewal project was moving at lightning speed. Permits that had been stuck for years were suddenly approved, and construction crews began breaking ground on a new youth center in the heart of the city's roughest district. Lena felt a sense of pride she hadn't felt in years, but she was also naive to the cost. She didn't realize that by cleaning up the streets, Jae-Hwan was cutting into the profits of his biggest rival, the ruthless Park Syndicate. The ribbon-cutting ceremony is tonight, Jae-Hwan said, walking into the glass-walled conference room. He looked sharp, but his eyes were constantly scanning the perimeter. I told you it was a security risk, Lena. We should postpone it. No, Lena insisted, her eyes flashing with the same fire that had led her to slap him. The community is already there. If we cancel now, they'll lose hope. You promised to protect them. Protect the event. Jae-Hwan looked at her for a long moment, then sighed. Fine. But you stay within 3 feet of me at all times. The event was held in a transformed alleyway, now lit with bright, hopeful lights. Hundreds of local families had gathered, cheering as Lena took the stage. For a moment, it felt like a dream. But as Lena handed the ceremonial scissors to Jae-Hwan, she noticed something strange. The crowd at the back wasn't cheering. They were moving, parting like water before a predator. Jae-Hwan, look out! Lena screamed. A high-pitched crack shattered the music. A speaker next to Lena's head exploded in a shower of sparks. Panic erupted. The crowd surged forward, screaming and trampling over chairs. In the chaos, a group of men in gray jackets, park soldiers, swarmed the stage. Jae-Hwan's bodyguards moved to intercept, but they were outnumbered. "Get her to the car," Jae-Hwan roared, pushing Lena toward Marco. But before Marco could reach her, a second shot rang out. Jae-Hwan jerked violently. He didn't fall, but he stumbled, his hand clutching his side as dark crimson began to soak through his charcoal suit. He had moved into the line of fire to shield Lena from a sniper on a nearby balcony. "Jae-Hwan." Lena lunged for him, catching him before he hit the stage. "Go." "Lena, move," he wheezed, his face turning a terrifying shade of gray. But Lena didn't run. She looked at the blood on her hands, his blood, and then at the men closing in. The social worker who hated violence was gone. In her place was a woman who would burn the world to protect the man who had just taken a bullet for her. "Marco, the car is blocked," Lena shouted over the gunfire. "The back alley. We have to go through the slums. They won't know the shortcuts like I do." The neon lights of the city felt like accusing eyes as Lena and Marco dragged Jae-Hwan into the labyrinth of the back alleys. The dragon was heavy, his breathing a wet, terrifying rattle that echoed against the damp brick walls. Every time his polished leather shoes dragged against the gravel, Lena felt a stab of guilt. He had taken a bullet meant for her. "The main roads are crawling with Park's men," Marco hissed, his eyes darting toward the mouth of the alley where headlights cut through the rain. "We can't get him to a hospital. They'll be waiting at every entrance." "Then we go where they can't follow," Lena said, her voice hard. She led them deeper into the maze of the old district, a place where the maps didn't quite match the reality of the crumbling buildings. They reached a rusted steel door hidden behind a stack of wooden pallets. Lena fumbled with a set of keys and kicked the door open. It was the basement of an abandoned youth center she had fought to save years ago. It was cold and smelled of dust, but it was invisible to the world. "Get him on the table," Lena commanded. Under the flickering yellow light of a single bulb, Jae-Hwan looked mortal. His skin was the color of salt, and his hand was clamped over a jagged hole in his side. When Lena peeled back his ruined shirt, her breath hitched. The bullet was deep. "You should have run," Jae-Hwan whispered, his eyes unfocused, drifting toward the ceiling. "Be quiet," Lena snapped, though her hands were shaking as she grabbed a bottle of high-proof alcohol and a sewing kit from the center's old emergency stash. "You spent weeks telling me how powerful you are. Now prove it. Stay awake." The next hour was a blur of red and white. Outside, the sound of sirens and screeching tires told them the city was being torn apart as the two syndicates clashed, but inside the basement, the only sound was Lena's steadying breaths and the clink of metal against glass. She wasn't a doctor, but she had spent years patching up street kids and elderly neighbors who were too afraid to go to the police. As she pulled the last stitch tight, Jae-Hwan's hand suddenly shot out, gripping her wrist. His touch was cold, but his grip was like iron. "Why?" he wheezed, looking at her as if seeing her for the first time. "I'm the monster, Lena. You said it yourself. You could have let the Park family finish it." Lena looked down at the man who had terrified her, shadowed her, and finally saved her. She reached out with a damp cloth and wiped a smudge of blood from his cheek, the same cheek she had slapped. "Because," she whispered, "the city doesn't need a monster, Jae-Hwan. But it might just need a dragon who knows what it feels like to bleed." For 3 days, the basement was their entire world. Jae-Hwan's fever broke on the second night, and by the third, he was sitting up against a stack of gym mats, his face regaining its sharp, dangerous edges. Outside, the news was filled with reports of gangland violence as the Kim group systematically crushed the Park syndicate in retaliation for the hit. Lena sat across from him, eating a bowl of instant noodles she had heated on a camping stove. The silence was heavy, filled with everything they hadn't said since the shooting. "Marco says the city is secure," Jae-Hwan said, his voice stronger now. "My men are waiting at the end of the alley. It's time to go back, Lena. Time to finish this." "Finish it how?" Lena asked, setting her bowl down. By killing everyone who stood in your way? By turning the streets into a graveyard? Jae-Hwan's eyes narrowed. They tried to kill you, Lena. They shot me. In my world, that requires a response that ensures it never happens again. That is how I protect what is mine. Lena stood up, her shadow stretching long across the concrete floor. I am not yours, Jae-Hwan. And neither is this city. You told me you wanted to see if my fire was real. Well, here it is. She stepped into his space, her eyes defiant. If you go back and start a massacre, you're just proving you're the same boy who let a gang destroy his life, just with a more expensive suit. You have the power to change the rules now. Not through fear, but through the loyalty of the people I've been helping. Jae-Hwan looked at her, his jaw tightening. He was used to people begging for their lives or demanding money. He wasn't used to someone demanding his soul. The Park family still has assets in the docks, he argued, though his tone lacked its usual bite. If I don't take them out, they will rebuild. Then don't take them out, take them over, Lena countered. Turn those docks into the shipping hubs for the urban renewal project. Give those soldiers jobs that don't involve pulling triggers. Give them a reason to be loyal to a leader who builds things instead of just burning them down. Jae-Hwan stared at her for a long time. The dragon was at a crossroads. He could go back to the darkness he knew, or follow the woman who had slapped him into a new kind of light. He slowly reached out and took Lena's hand. His palm was warm, and his grip, though firm, was no longer a cage. You are the most expensive person I have ever met, Lena Park, he murmured. You ask for things that cost more than gold. Is the price too high? She whispered. Jae-Hwan pulled her closer, his forehead resting against hers. No. But if I do this, if I change my world, I won't do it alone. You started this with a slap. Now you have to stay and help me finish it. 6 months later, the rain was falling again, but this time it didn't feel like a shroud. The dragon had returned to the throne, but the kingdom looked entirely different. The glass towers of the Kim group were no longer just symbols of fear, they were the engines behind the New Seoul initiative. The grand opening of the Han River Community Center was the talk of the country. Standing on the balcony of the center, Lena looked down at the crowd. There were no black-clad soldiers pushing people aside. Instead, former gang members wore security uniforms, standing tall as they directed families toward the free medical wing. Jae-Hwan stepped out from the shadows of the doorway. He wore a navy suit, looking every bit the sophisticated leader. He stood beside Lena, his shoulder brushing hers. The scar on his side still ached during the rain, but it served as a permanent reminder of the night he almost lost everything, and the woman who refused to let him. The reports are in, Jae-Hwan said, his voice carrying a warmth that used to be impossible. Crime in the old district is down 40%. The schools are full. And the Park family's former soldiers? They're the hardest workers we have on the dock projects. I told you, Lena smiled, leaning her head against his arm. People want to build Jae-Hwan. They just need a leader who gives them the tools instead of the fear. He turned to her, taking her hands in his. On his finger, the silver dragon ring glinted, but it no longer looked like a weapon. I spent my life thinking I was the one who ruled this city. I didn't realize I was just a prisoner of my own power until you slapped some sense into me. He pulled a small, velvet box from his pocket. Inside was a necklace, a delicate silver chain with a single, brilliant emerald shaped like a drop of rain. The press is waiting downstairs, Jae-Hwan murmured, his eyes locking onto hers. They want to know if the rumors are true. They want to know if the dragon has finally been tamed. Lena laughed, the sound bright and clear against the hum of the city. She reached up, her fingers tracing the sharp line of his jaw, the spot where she had once struck him in a moment of pure fury. Tell them the dragon wasn't tamed, she whispered, stepping closer until their breaths mingled. Tell them he just found something worth protecting more than his pride. As they walked down the stairs together, hand in hand, the flashbulbs of 100 cameras exploded like stars. The world saw a powerful man and a defiant woman, but Lena and Jae-Hwan only saw each other. The war was over, the debt was paid, and the new reign had finally begun.